Hi, Salim Omar here. I'm absolutely delighted to have our guest today. His name is Dr. Michael Usim. Dr. Usim, welcome.
Thank you, Salim. Great to be here.
Dr. Usim is the William and Jacqueline Egan Professor of Management at Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, where he's also the director of the Center for Leadership and Change Management. He's the author of several books, including The Leadership Moment, The Leader's Checklist, and his brand new book, The Edge: How 10 CEOs Learned to Lead and the Lessons for Us All. His university teaching includes MBA and executive MBA courses on management and leadership, and he offers programs on leadership for managers across the world. He works on leadership development with many companies and organizations in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. He is also the co-author on the SiriusXM weekly program, Leadership in Action. I am so looking forward to this to this interview, and because it's going to be amazing. Dr. Rasim, if you I don't know if you remember, but 5-6 years back, you'd come on my show, and it was one of the most popular episodes that I've done in the last after interviewing like hundreds of people. So really, really glad that you took me up on my offer.
Well, it's a privilege to be back. Thank you, Salim.
So let's start off with, what does it take to be in a position of leadership in today's world?
For me, a colleague's book really changed my thinking forever. The author on this issue, the author is Herminia Ibarra, Ibarra. You'll find her book. It's out there in the usual sources, and she makes an argument, and I'm increasingly persuaded by watching people in leadership positions that this is the vital foundation, and that is to decide you're going to make a difference in the lives of others. It could be because you're leading a Girl Scout group. It could be because you're leading an IC unit at a hospital. It may be because you're leading a state or a province in a country. It doesn't have to be high or low, but it does require a commitment on your own part, almost an existential decision to adopt an identity as a person who makes a difference in the lives of others. And the term we tend to sum up that capacity is they are a leader. So in the first instance, and it really is a first instance, we just have to make that decision. Then, having made the decision, we've really got to think about, okay, thank you. I want to be more active in shaping the way this hospital is going or a startup is going to grow. And that then requires us to think through, well, what are the pieces? What are the components? And for that, I end up with my own leader's checklist. We got to think strategically. We've got to decide decisively. We got to communicate persuasively, and another dozen items really go into it. So in the first instance, you've got to make a decision, and you've made it. Many people will make it or have made it. And then you have to be on top of what it's going to take to implement or execute your strategy or to bring it to life. And for that, a leader's checklist is vital. Third point, I'll be very brief on this, and that is what worked maybe 5 years ago for you is going to take some rethinking this year and certainly 5 years from now. So work it out for what we need now, but don't forget next year, certainly 5 years, and for sure 10 years out, you're going to have to rethink how you're going to lead your commitment to leadership into the reality of leadership.
What has changed in leadership, if anything, in the past 5 years or so?
I think above all, and this comes out in the book that you referenced, The Edge, where I spent time with 9 chief executives trying to get exactly a sense for that. So what are they doing now that's going to be necessary for 5 years out? That is, in fact, different from 5 years ago. And there are 2 pieces to that. Let me be very brief, but name them both. The first is to devise a method for trying to understand what's going to be different or what is changing around you as we speak. Case in point for that is of a regional bank chief executive that I profiled in the book The Edge. His name is Mark Turner. He ran did run then a company called WSFS, a fairly large regional bank. And he knew that financial technologies were fundamentally transforming an industry which was famous for its storefronts. The teller was a staple of American communities for the last 100 years, or the communities all over the world. A person you could go in and get banking services, or a higher official who was at that physical location. But new financial technologies, fintech for short, are allowing us now to go online at some banks and take out a loan of X dollars in 25 minutes or open up a bank account in 3 minutes. And some people will say, I don't want to walk into a branch anymore. But of course, some people say, I love my branch and don't shut it down. So to understand, though, the answer to this question of should I go totally fintech or should I stay bricks and mortar, Mark Turner, I love the example, told the board or explained to the board, had to get approval to take 3 months of what he called a learning tour. So he left the bank. He traveled to 49 different companies, including Walmart and Apple. And he said, let me understand, in the case of Walmart, how do you combine online with physical retail? Spent 3 days down there trying to get a sense for how they can do it so he can do it. So he came back, returned to the bank. He's now executive chair, no longer chief executive. But he has said, and I recommend the method to everybody, taking off a concentrated period of study. Look at the world. What's going to be required 5 years from now that coming back to leadership is going to be vital for you to lead. Good to get a hold of that now than to be caught kind of flat-footed 5 years out. So look ahead, figure out what you need, bring that future into the present, and then build towards the future you know is coming with a different leadership skill set.
Brilliant. Great advice. What inspired you to write the book, the new book? You've written several. There's already great content strategies that you've shared and taught. What led you to your brand new book, The Edge?
So, Lim, it's a very good question because in the act of taking on the topic that I took on, I want to make an impact. I want people to have a means or a method of better understanding what they're going to need in the future. As an academic, I teach at a university, as you mentioned there at the outset. Research is a great way to think that through. Got a bunch of colleagues at my university that are great. I look at literature from all over the world. And that's very important, to be analytic, to look at the data, to draw conclusions out of systematic analysis and research. Having said that, though, I've also concluded from the teaching hat that I also wear, in which I work with MBA students, I work with many mid-career people, I work with people in the armed forces and government, I work with people from many countries, and watching our dialogue in a classroom on these topics, I think the research requires a complement that is another edge to it. And that complement is looking at these ideas in action. And I think the way we think about leadership, maybe more than almost any other topic that comes to my mind, we need to know what research and leading thinkers on the topic of leadership, what they're saying, but we also have to see it in the other people that we may work with, may join in some leadership pursuit with. And thus, the book, The Edge, is my effort to spend a lot of time with 9 people who are learning to lead for the future. They're already leaders, but they need to learn, they are learning for the future to understand in detail how they're doing it. And my effort in this book is thus to bring in some research, but it's more about the other half of that combination, that those complementary pieces. And that is, let's look at what, as I did look at what the chief executive of Estee Lauder Companies, the great maker of beauty products, is doing to ensure that company prospers in the years ahead. I looked at the chief executive of Vanguard Group, one of the world's largest investment managers, and on. And in doing that, the effort is to ensure that people who pick this up, my effort to try to ensure that they've got great ideas from the field of research and thoughtful thought on the topic, but also they can see the concepts in place, in action, in a person. And I believe from my own experience, that's what we all tend to hang on to. So we know that bringing justice and civil rights to America is vital. We know some of the more abstract statements about how to do that, but there are a few better ways to understand how to indeed achieve that than to look at the life of Martin Luther King, or in the case of South Africa, the life of Nelson Mandela. So I don't feature them in the book. There's so much written about them, but I've tried to get into the lives of people of their stature, more in this case in the private sector, almost primarily, as a way of trying to answer the question, what do we want? And then how do we get it? And I think the research and experience together is the combination that delivers the punch we need.
If you don't mind, I'd love for you to share some of the lessons that you share in the book and really bring it home for us as a small business owner with one employee, with 5 employees, with 20 employees. Some of these lessons, how do they, what do they mean and how do they apply to the small business owner?
So, Salim, it's a really important connecting question to the broader agenda in the book based on an assumption that I've already cited. And that is leadership is one of those great universals of our universe. Um, I don't care if we're in Beijing or in Sao Paulo, Brazil, or in northern Italy. I believe from a lot of research, I've written a couple of books on leadership in Indian companies and in Chinese companies, that the elements are common to them all. And now back to your point, they're common to a company like Walmart with over 2 million employees, and they're complements to a startup with 3 employees or even 2 employees. And to that end, I do have a chapter in the book where I took a hard look at a startup around the issue of leadership to, again, draw upon that world for some of the nuances that come with it, but remembering what is certainly what's in my chapter about that particular company, in my view, applies to every company, whether you're the size of the startup or 2 million, 2.5 million, like a Walmart. And here's the main point I want to bring out, say, from that chapter for those who are running a smaller enterprise. In this case, I was looking at the smaller enterprise through the eyes of a private equity firm that had put a substantial fraction of its money into a startup that made the lenses for smart telephones. So think about your Samsung or your Apple device. There's, of course, a very high quality single or even 3 lens set in the phone that brings to life what's so important about a smartphone. And this company was a maker, had a unique technology, a very small company, a very good technology for making small lenses that were of high resolution. But it struggled. And it struggled for reasons that weren't clear. There's lots of competition. The big users of the products, Apple, Samsung, and so on, were very demanding of what was being sold, ultimately manufactured and sold to them. And through the eyes of the private equity investor, this company looked like it was just not going to survive. It looked like it had a pretty good technology. It looked like it had pretty good manufacturing. But when it came to actually making the company work as a whole, at least it was hypothesized by the private equity firm, it may not have had the right person in the catbird seat here for running a company that could get things made on a timely basis on a certain set of quality standards. So, point I make with this detailed look at the private equity company's view and the experience of the initial chief executive, and then the private equity firm brought in a successor chief executive, it made all the difference. It was amazing. It was startling to me. as I looked at it up close, how much difference, given the technology you have, how much difference, given the high demand that the company had for its technology, to have a person like yourself who understands leadership in the full sense. You are a complete leader for a small startup, let's say in manufacturing. That means accounting, it means manufacturing procedures, it means human resources. You want people who are going to come for the pay you can afford. And thus, uh, I guess the final statement I would make on this is this: it doesn't matter what your size is. When it comes to leading, although the practice of leadership is going to look different in a startup from a large one, but the underlying points are pretty much the same, and they're summed up in a phrase that I've come to use. When you run an enterprise of 3 people, or one day maybe 3 million at Walmart, you've got to think like a CEO. And by that, I mean, if you're not the CEO, put everything together in your head. If you are a CEO, what I mean is, and most people are totally aware of this, so this is certainly preaching to the choir, you have to think about everything. What does the owner want or the investor expect? What does the customer want? In this case, some very tough customers like Apple. And why do people want to work for you? So you got to think about the human capital side as well. And what should be the right price, and what kind of machinery should you buy for your factory? So I think to make that a very general statement, but I think it's very apt here for everybody. Think like you are a CEO and get the leadership implications of that out into you, whether you're not CEO or not, whether you're a startup or a big company. It's vital.
Wow, that's amazing. What what are one or two ways for someone to do that, to start living that, to really internalize what you just said, and then to start living it? What gets in the way, and what can be one or two things we can get around those, over those?
So, Salim, here's one of the great ironies of our universe. I think we pretty much all know that leadership can make an enormous difference if it's well fashioned. And by the way, recently came out a study that looked at how much can a coach or a general manager of a professional sports team in the United States make on team performance. Coaches come and go, managers come and go, but assuming we look at one of these, let's make it a football franchise in the National Football League, a good piece of research found that as a general manager or a coach turned over, the head coach turned over, with everything else staying the same, most of the players on contracts, so they're still there, for example, that one person, one coach, one general manager at an enterprise from other research could make as much as a 30% difference in performance, win loss for NFL, earnings per share if you're a public company, maybe revenue if it's a privately held company, within 1 to 3 is 30%, not 2%, 30%. So, with that said, really important to get on top of this. But if you think about your university days, I was a physics major in my days. It never occurred to me to think about leadership. I never had a course. There wasn't even a course at the time. But I think many companies, many governments, many agencies, many nonprofits have concluded in recent years that some of us have a head start. Nobody is ever born a full-blown leader. Some do have a head start, but everybody, you, me, those connected with this program, unequivocally can improve if they have the right pathways. And the pathways have become pretty well known from research, experience. We follow all three where I'm located. Number one is to encourage people around you and yourself to read, watch, study the universe we're in. Life is an unbelievably good classroom if we're observant and absorbent of what is happening around us, and maybe even with the people who work for us. Number two, more important, look for a mentor or two, or an advisor or two, or a coach or two, or actually more than that. Coaching and mentoring from research and unequivocally from experience has come to the fore as not something for the needy who are looking for remedial or kind of service or trying to overcome their bad habits, this is an affirmative. And a good, well trained advisor, coach, or mentor can help you make leaps and bounds advances in how you lead. Third, though, most important of the three avenues, but keep in mind all three, is getting out there and doing it, and then taking the time to do what the U.S. Armed Forces will call an after action review. Watch what you did, look back on what you did, and then go forward. My example, not described in the book, but I've written about this elsewhere, is for the great Chinese personal computer maker, and now a more general technology company called Lenovo. We all know Lenovo. You'll see it in hospitals. You'll see it in companies. I've got a Lenovo laptop on my desk here. And the person who built the company, I've interviewed a bunch of times, along with other people who work at Lenovo, began with two people. So he started a company. It had a different name. It was called Legend to begin with. And he said at the end of the first week, he didn't know anything about anything when it came to technology or marketing or sales or revenue or accounting. But on Friday afternoon, he and his one other employee said, okay, what do we do right this week? And when we screwed up, messed up, what are we going to do differently next week? He's done that for 40 years, and Lenovo now is the number one maker of personal computers around the world. Tough industry, as we know, in part because he's made a self-conscious decision to learn to lead and change his leadership as those after-action reviews dictated. So, quick summary, and then back to you. Leadership is a learned skill set, hard to get. We want it, and indeed it's out there for the asking.
That's awesome. Man, time's flying. You're like giving us so much wisdom. Appreciate it. A couple more questions before we finish up, Dr. Asim. What was perhaps something that you were surprised as you were doing your research and meeting up with these 9 executives, and in the times that we live in now? What was that one thing that you're like, wow, interesting, I didn't think so, or it came to you as a reminder of something you already know but may have kind of put it aside or something? What was that one lesson or gem that you personally got from interviewing 9 amazing individuals?
It's such a good question, and I've always used the equivalent when I sit down with somebody. We sit with a lot of people, the kind of people you have on your program, and I often ask almost the same question. What's the most surprising thing that you learned when you became chief executive? Or what's the most shocking thing you thought was true when you became a top manager that turned out not to be true? But on your variant, I would point to an experience I had when I went to visit the chief executive of Progressive Insurance. Her name is Patricia Griffith, known as Trish, runs a huge insurance company, 40,000 employees, growing like crazy, growing, in fact, so fast that Fortune magazine made her CEO of the year of the Standard & Poor's 500 a couple of years ago because her company was growing. It's like a startup. It was growing faster than was Apple growing at the time. Anyway, Tricia Griffith became CEO of the year on the front cover there. And I discovered, to my surprise, that a vital element, not the only element, but a vital surprise to me, I kind of knew it abstractly, but I felt it, I saw it on the ground, is Tricia Griffith's ability to relate to everybody. So she's no longer the big boss. She's no longer in the high castle in some remote location. She refuses to take the elevator. She wants to go up and down stairs or walk the corridors instead, to meet people, to have a conversation. Hey, how's it going? What's up with your family? So you're thinking of moving. What can we do to make your life here at Progressive more appealing so you don't move? She'll sit down in the employee cafeteria, uninvited, to say, hey, guys, you know who I am. I'd like to meet you. Let's talk about what happened last weekend. It's all a way of saying that in the world we're in, and this is, I think, the lesson for all of us, it certainly was for me, that in the next 10 or 15 years of leading anything, a mid-sized company, a startup, a very mature company that might have more than, say, 40 or 50,000 employees, that the grassroots, the front lines, the people who are people out there, they want contact with you. They want to know who you are. They want to see you. And by the way, Tricia Griffiths, to make the point, on the day that's coming up in the U.S. in just a couple days at the end of this month, the holiday of Halloween, where traditionally Americans will go to neighbors and say, can you give me a treat or I'll play a trick? They come in costume. Tricia Griffith and all of her top people dress as comic figures. She dressed as Captain Marvel a couple of years ago. They walk around, and what's that got to do with earnings per share? Nothing directly. But a lot of people are going to report, gee, I saw the boss today looking like Captain Marvel, and boy, was that marvelous. She's just like us, or I'm just like she is. So bottoms up, people first. We just got to find ways of making that happen. And I think the most surprising thing for me is every place I went into, every company I spoke with, every top executive had, in different words, the same point to make. The power is in the people that work for you. And the trick then, or the art of leadership, is to get that artful execution of their own job to come to the fore with energy, resolve, and enthusiasm. So let's stop being the big boss. Let's get out of the pedestal. Let's walk the hallway. Let's sit down for lunch with everybody.
Amazing. Good stuff. Dr. Asim, I hate to finish this off. It's been incredible. I could have gone for another hour. How can people continue the journey? What's one or two things they can do to continue the process?
Yeah, well, to kind of recap what we said, just remember you're listening to this program because you already have decided, you've passed that first test, you've decided to make a difference in the lives of others, whether in a social movement or running a startup or a well-established enterprise. And then becoming a self-conscious, self-directed student of leadership. Watch what Mother Teresa did, or Winston Churchill, or watch what if you know other startups, watch what others are doing. Don't mimic, don't copy, selectively pick what's going to work for you. Find a coach or a mentor or a family friend or maybe your partner to give you good feedback, constructive feedback. And finally, I'll end on this. I wish at age 22, I'd kind of conquered that particular summit and I could say, I've got it and I'm going to lead for the rest of my life with it. But we know it's lifelong, in part because it's going to be different 5 years from now, and in part because what we're leading 5 years out will be different, looking at our own enterprise setting. So stay with it, everybody. Let's make a difference. Let's learn how to do it. You can do it. I know because we've seen many people do it. And the number one driver of all that is you. You've got the identity there. Now decide to ensure that you've got the right set of leadership qualities to make a difference. That's what you want to do. That's what I want to do.
Awesome. Great. Your book, The Edge, is available on all the major booksellers, correct?
Indeed.
And your radio show, you co-host or co-anchor a satellite radio show. Can you tell us a little bit about how folks can get to that?
Yeah, it's very easy. So if you are a subscriber in the U.S. and Canada, and you are a subscriber to Sirius XM, many new cars come with it built in, then you have to subscribe. But they have more than 30 million subscribers to Sirius XM. It's a growth industry. And we are channel 132. So just turn your dial to channel 132 at 3 p.m. on Friday afternoons, and magically you're going to hear a show. Actually, it's not unlike, Salim, what you've done, in which we tend to bring people in, people like you. We've had Stanley McChrystal, who's written a great book called Team of Teams, former U.S. general. We've had many people from startups come on our show to really kind of tell their own story about how they made a difference. So channel 132, Sirius XM, Fridays at 3 p.m.
Awesome. You were very generous with everything that you shared. Appreciate you coming on the show, Dr. Asim, and great. Thank you very much.
All right, Salim. Thank you. Great to work with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the CPA Marketing Genius podcast. If you'd like to hear more episodes, you can find them at cpamarketinggenius.simplecast.com or on your favorite podcast directory. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to learn more about Salim and CPA Marketing Genius, please visit cpamarketinggenius.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the CPA Marketing Genius podcast.